Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our final week looking at the book of Genesis and doing our best to see exactly how Genesis looks forward to the coming of Christ and how he was there in the beginning and all the way through. We're going to begin tonight in Genesis 37 and give it the old college try to see about getting through to the end of the book. If you know your Genesis, this is the story of Joseph. He's never called one of the patriarchs, but he's a son of the patriarchs, and he becomes, really his two sons become two of the tribes of Israel. The Joseph story is an amazing story. It has everything. It reads like a Lifetime movie. It's got favoritism, envy, betrayal, slavery, temptation, false accusations, and imprisonment, broken promises, politics, famine, all that cool stuff. But the main character is not Joseph. The main character is God. And that may sound strange because if you know this story real well, compared to other parts of Genesis, God doesn't appear as visibly as he does everywhere else. There's no creation command like Genesis 1. There's no walking in the garden like Genesis 3. No flood, no covenant ceremony, no wrestling match with God. God is physically invisible in Joseph's story, and yet, because he is invisible, he is everywhere. He's ruling through the dreams that he gives to Joseph. He's sovereign over all the family conflict, even the slave traders who buy Joseph. He's sovereign over all the Egyptian officials who buy Joseph, cupbearers and bakers, candlestick makers, all that stuff. Most of our lives do not feel like the extravagance of the Red Sea. Most of our lives feel like Joseph in prison, where it's very ordinary, very long, very confused, everything is delayed, a lot of it's quite painful, and most of it is very unclear. Not very much guidance in terms of like getting an email from God every morning about what to do. We don't always see God's hand very clearly. We don't always know why a door closes, why someone betrays us, why an opportunity gets delayed, why we feel forgotten, or sometimes why obedience actually makes life so much more difficult. But Joseph teaches us that God's providence, which will be the key word tonight. If election was the key word last Monday night, tonight the key word is providence. Joseph teaches us that providence is not absent simply because it is hidden. And the key verse comes at the end of Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, which I'm sure most of us, if I started, we could finish it. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. That sentence is one of the clearest statements of providence in all of Scripture. But let's keep the main thing the main thing. First, we have to remember Genesis needs Christ to understand it. Genesis needs the book Christ to understand the rest of the book. So what is providence? Well, one of the clearest definitions of providence I think I've ever come across came from John Piper. He says that providence is defined as God's purposeful sovereignty. So if you go backwards with that, we know that God is sovereign, and that means he can do whatever he wishes. There's nothing holding him back but his own nature. The purposeful part is the answer to the question, so what is God doing with all that power? What are his intentions? What is he doing with that omnipotence? Providence is God's purposeful sovereignty. Up on the screen here, we have a selection from our Confession of Faith, the Second London Baptist Confession, and it has an article on providence. And part of the article says that God is the good creator of all things. In his infinite power and wisdom, does uphold, direct, dispose, and govern all creatures and things by his most wise and holy, here's the word, providence. It goes on and says later that God's providence extends even to the first fall, which we understood from the first week, and all other sinful actions, in such a way that God does not sin and is not the author of sin. Sin always comes from the creature. Genesis 50, verse 20, is the prime passage for us to illustrate God's providence, his purposeful sovereignty. What is he doing with all that power? That's his purpose. Even though we see evil everywhere, he means it for good. Joseph's story shows us that God preserves the covenant line, all the covenant promises, through providence. The family of promise, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and now his 12 sons, they are threatened by famine in the land, so a very natural disaster. They're threatened by their own sin, sibling rivalry, and even the death of some people. But God is quietly moving everything so that the seed of the promise will continue. Joseph's suffering is not meaningless, and it becomes the pathway by which God preserves his people, through whom Christ will come. So that's why providence is practical, because God is ordering all events in the world, the things that we see, the things that we walk right by every day, in order to bring about his purposes. Let's begin looking at Joseph's story in chapter 37. The first thing we see is that the covenant family is nearly destroyed by envy. Genesis 37 begins with Jacob settled back in Canaan. That sounds hopeful. That sounds great. The covenant line is back in the land. Jacob is now Israel. Mike, I think, had a good question last week. So why is he called Jacob and Israel still after God changes his name? This is not maybe the perfect answer, but you can think of Israel like a nickname. It's much more reverent than that, but it is a name given to Jacob to describe his relationship to God, one who wrestles with God. Jacob's his name, so is Israel, but it's a name that describes who he is. So they're all back in the land. Jacob has become Israel. The family is growing, but the family is not very healthy. Look at verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. Now, he's the son of his old age, meaning he was born in Jacob's elderly years, but he's not the youngest even. Benjamin will be born later, and he's even the youngest. Not even beyond that, Jacob should have known better. What kind of household did Jacob grow up in? Pretty dysfunctional. A lot of favoritism. Isaac, his dad, loved Esau. Rebekah, his mom, loved Jacob. And that favoritism is what tore the family apart. And yet these family patterns, without divine intervention, without grace, repeats the same pattern. And so Jacob, Israel, repeats the same pattern with his sons. Sin often travels through family lines, not because people are helpless victims of their past, but because patterns get learned, patterns get normalized, and then patterns get repeated. The favorite child becomes the favorite child forever. And the wounded children who are around that favorite child, they just keep getting hurt. And unless grace interrupts that sinful pattern, we often produce the sins of our parents. And we're told here that Jacob gives Joseph a very special robe. Most of our translations say a coat or a robe of many colors. That many colors word in Hebrew is a difficult word to translate. It means something literally like a coat with long sleeves. King David's daughter, much later, Tamar, the same word is used to describe her clothing, her robe. So the idea is that it's a robe meant for indoors. It's not something you would wear out in the field. So if that's the kind of clothing that Jacob buys for Joseph, what is Joseph doing all day? He's in the air conditioning. Where are his brothers? with the donkeys, with the sheep. So he's not wearing Carhartt. He's wearing Lululemon. Verse 4 says, "But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him." The family is broken, they're fractured, and that means ordinary civility, just the pleasantries that we give to everybody because we're human, that's all broken down. And then Joseph has his two famous dreams in chapter 37. As a quick summary of these dreams, you can look in verses 5 through 8. Jacob has these visions of the brothers being represented by sheaves or bundles of wheat, and those sheaves bow down to him. And they know exactly what that dream means. One, because I'm sure Joseph was very happy to tell them about it. And they know that it means one day he thinks they will bow down to him. He has another dream in verses 9 through 11. And now it's even more cosmic in scale. There are 11 stars, which represent his brothers, but now that there's also a sun and a moon representing the father and the mother. So the whole family will one day be bowing down to Joseph. Joseph's dreams are a prophecy of God making him king. And the brothers understand exactly what those dreams are meant to convey. They know where it's going. Now, Joseph is not the Messiah. He's not the ultimate promised seed of the woman, but his life will be an installment in the pattern on the way to Jesus Christ. You have a king who gets rejected, he's humiliated, but then he's exalted and he saves the people, his own people, once he is exalted. Now, this is also a warning about envy. Envy is not just wanting what someone else has. That in itself is not some great sin, to see what someone else has and think, I'd like that. Envy resents the other person for having it. That's where envy becomes sinful, or envy is sinful, and envy is resenting those who have what you want. Envy says, if I can't have that, neither should he. So envy can't be glad that someone else has some great blessing and you don't have that same blessing. Envy interprets someone else's good as a personal threat to you. If envy sees life as a zero-sum game, if you have it, that means I can't. Envy is especially destructive in families and in churches. And why is that? Because families and churches are places where love should produce joy in other people's successes and they're good. When envy enters into very tight-knit places, it's especially bitter. It's going to destroy any kind of community they have. Joseph's brothers are not strangers, they're not enemies, they're his own flesh and blood, and yet they hate him. James 3:16 says, "Where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." Genesis 37 proves that in spades. Secondly, still in 37, Joseph is turned into a slave. Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers, meaning he's still in his fuzzy Louis Vuitton coat at home in the air conditioning. So he's sent out, and I'm sure he's all miffed about having to go out into the heat to see his brothers, to check on them. But when they see him coming, what do? They hate him so much, they concoct a plan in minutes to kill him. Verses 19 and 20 say, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits." They call him this dreamer. They don't even call him our brother or Joseph. He's just this dreamer. They absolutely despise him, and they despise any possibility that God may have revealed something through him. They can't even fathom the idea that this little jerk is going to be an important part of God's providence in their own future. So he has to go. They don't have to kill him. One of his brothers Reuben, he intervenes. He has some, I want to think there's some kind of conscience in Reuben. Now he offers a perhaps better solution, but it's not really any better. It's just, let's not kill him, let's sell him. And they sell him off to some slave traders. And then in verse 25 comes this really despicable note. Then they sat down to eat. Their brother is in a pit, and all they can think about is their next meal. Does that sound familiar? So sin will harden the conscience. Sin will harden the conscience. It's not up for debate. This is what sin does. People can commit terrible wrongs and then go on with their ordinary lives. They can throw somebody into a pit. They can sell them to slave traders, like Judah will do eventually, and then go for lunch. They can deceive, they can gossip, they can manipulate, they can even murder someone, and then just go to McAllister's and have some grub. So Reuben says, let's toss him into the pit. Let's just kind of leave him and see what happens. Judah says, let's not kill him. Let's just maybe see if we can sell him. So his concern isn't repentance. Like he's not, maybe there's some kind of conscience, kind of maybe like Reuben's, but he's motivated here by profit. He still wants him gone. So is it better? Maybe by a matter of degrees, but not that much. So they sell Joseph to Ishmaelites. Where has Ishmael come up before? Who is Ishmael? Yep. So he was someone that Abraham tried to, in his own power, continue the covenant promises. And God said, nope, through Isaac will your offspring be named. So the Ishmaelites are the descendants of Ishmael. So it's all this irony that they're selling one of the covenant sons to one of the non-covenant sons just for some money. So Joseph is now taken to Egypt. The brothers think they can trick their dad by dipping Joseph's robe, his famous long sleeve, beautiful robe, in some goat's blood. It'll look like his. And once they show their dad, he thinks that Joseph has been killed and he's eaten by some giant animal. So there's no comfort for dad. He thinks his son is dead. His favorite son is dead. But underneath all of this, God is not absent. The brothers think they're getting rid of Joseph, but in reality, what have they done? They have sent him to the place where God will eventually use him to preserve their lives. It's just divine irony. And that does not make sin good. It does not make them innocent. It shows that God's providence is deeper and so much stronger than any human evil. If you were to read Psalm 105, it looks back on this story, especially verses 16 and 17, and it says, when God summoned a famine on the land and broke all supply of bread, he had sent a man ahead of them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. Look very closely at verse 16. Notice that word. He had sent a man ahead of them. Who does the author of Psalm 105 say sent Joseph into Egypt? God did. Well, didn't the brothers think they sent Joseph into Egypt? Well, they sold him into Egypt. God sent him ahead of them. Both of them are true in different senses. The brothers sinned, and God simply governed. Third, the Lord did not leave Joseph alone in his humiliation. So if we skip ahead to chapter 39, 38 is very, very important because it is it's a contrast between Judah and Joseph. So it's not like it was dropped in randomly. If it's ever felt like that, It's meant to be this contrast between noble Joseph. Even though he's hated, he's a noble person, and he has a conscience, unlike his brothers. For example, Judah sleeping with his daughter-in-law in that chapter. We're going to skip over it just for tonight. In Genesis 39, it begins with Joseph now in Egypt. He's been sold to Potiphar, who's an officer of the Pharaoh. We don't quite know exactly who he was, but he's up there. He's the captain of the guard. That could mean a few things, but he's an officer. At this point, Joseph has lost everything: his family, his land, his freedom, his status, his robe, which kind of exemplified his status, and any future that he may have thought. We'd forgive him if he thought those dreams were now null and void because of where he currently is. But look at verse 2. How does that begin? The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. That half sentence is the anchor of the chapter. The Lord was with Joseph, and Joseph became successful in Potiphar's house. Potiphar sees that God is with him, so he has no problem investing quite a bit of authority in Joseph. So Joseph serves this new master. He's very faithful, does not want to be there. Why would he? But he is where God has placed him, and it seems like he knows that. So he serves faithfully wherever he is. He was only there because his family wanted him dead. Most of everyone he knew hated him that much. And the Lord blesses the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And what this is doing is preparing Joseph for something later, even though he does not quite know what that might be. Now, because of his dreams, I think we can say that Joseph knew how this would end. I don't think Joseph is out of the loop. I don't think he knows the path to get there, but he was given the dream twice. And I think that confirms the reality. It was not like a one-off, he had too much pizza too late and had a fever dream, right? This was from God, and having it repeated means it's confirmed and will happen. So I think the Bible actors probably know more than we think they did. Joseph knew what was going to happen, just didn't know the path to get there. He is not lazy. He's not bitter. All of that stays away from him. He works faithfully wherever God has put him. Now, when life is unfair, we feel justified, at least I do, in becoming careless. People can say, since I've been mistreated, I don't have to be good. I don't have to be faithful. I have a right to mope. Right? Joseph does not do that. He serves well wherever God places him. Christian faithfulness often looks like serving well in circumstances that we would not have chosen. Then temptation comes. Potiphar's wife over and over again tries to seduce Joseph. And in verse 9, we get how he answered her. And his answer is rooted in some pretty good theology. He says, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Joseph understands that sexual sin is never just a private matter. It is sin against God. And he also understands that trust is lost very easily. Potiphar has entrusted Joseph with everything except his wife. Now that's trust. And Joseph refuses to use his very unique high-level access, top-floor access, as freedom to sin. This is integrity. And he refuses over and over again. Verse 10 says that she spoke to Joseph day after day. He would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be in the same place. All right. Do we have any prayer requests or praises? Have you talked to Terry?